Morning all. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a video on the Stastny brothers. I was pretty sure I had already done a video on the Stastny brothers because I've seen requests for a Peter Stastny video and I thought, well, I've already done a video on the Stastny brothers. Haven't. I searched the channel. So, and if I have, well, we'll see what kind of new information's on here that wasn't on here the last time. The Stastny brothers are a big part of the reason I became a huge hockey fan. Their story of how they defected was really something. So, for people who are younger, there was an Iron Curtain, and if you were behind it, good luck getting out. And it was tough. So the Stastny brothers, who were very talented at the whole hockey thing. What's interesting is the youngest brother was Peter. Anton was the middle brother. Marion was actually the oldest brother. Marion came over last. Now, what happened was you had with the Stastny brothers some very talented players who had proven how good they could be. 1976, a 19-year-old Peter Stastny helped Czechoslovakia, one country, Czech and Slovakia. When they split up, I was like, all right, so you take half the name and you take half the name. Checks out. They actually defeated the Soviet Union, which was considered quite the task and quite the accomplishment. And so they did that and they won gold at the World Championships in 1976. And Peter became like a huge hero to his people. And the Stastny brothers were a huge part of the reason why European players started showing up in Canada and in the U.S. And while Borje Salming was one of those pioneers, the Stastnys coming over really helped pave the way for Czech and Slovak players to start streaming into the NHL in the 80s. And eventually the government had to relax their standards because guys, once they left, it made it clear that there was a path to leave Czechoslovakia and make real money in the NHL and have a North American life. And the Stastnys ended up having Canadian citizenship. Their wives had Canadian citizenship as well. There were a lot of considerations when they came over about their families and making sure they were safe. And the Quebec Nordiques organization did a very good job of making sure that it was all done well. So while the Quebec Nordiques organization takes a lot of flack, and rightfully so in many areas, the acquisition of and the treatment of the Stastnys was quite something to behold. So remember, 80-81 is the year where I really started watching hockey. Now, I can't prove because, I mean, it's been a long time since then. I can't prove that the Stastny brothers were a big part of the reason why I became a bigger hockey fan, but I know I loved the Nordiques. And so when the Battle of Quebec was going on, sorry, Montreal fans, I was a huge Nordiques fan. And when they moved to Colorado, it was gutting for me on some level because I loved the Nordiques. I didn't want to see them go. So I'm going to follow this with all three because I don't think I can just do a video on Peter Stastny. And this was my thought this morning. So this did take quite a while to put together. But it is really just a matter of I can't talk about Peter without talking about Anton and Marion because historically, Anton and Marion are kind of a forgotten part of this. Peter and Anton get themselves out, and then Quebec does their best to get their wives and families out so that they don't have to worry about the repercussions. But after they leave, and the Czechoslovakian government knows they've left, Marion paid the price. He was followed. He couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't do much of anything, and he was banned from the national team. So they punished him and probably hurt their national team too. Because for the year these guys were playing, and I heard about Marion, I thought, Marion sounds like he's a pretty darn good player too. So I was really hoping for him to come over. When he comes over, he's 29 years of age. But let's go through the numbers. So Peter Stastny, the number two scorer in the National Hockey League during the 1980s, behind somebody you know as Wayne Gretzky. 77 games his first year, 39 goals, 70 assists, which is sixth overall, 109 points, which is sixth overall as well. In 5 playoff games, 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points. He wins the Calder, and he plays in the All-Star game that year. That same year, Anton Stastny plays all 80 games for Quebec, 39 goals, the same as his brother, 46 assists for 85 points. In the playoffs, in 5 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points. He's 10th in Calder voting. Both brothers were in the top 10 in the Calder vote. And Anton, I thought, was very talented as well. And I think one thing that's interesting looking back historically is that because of the generally short careers that Anton and Marion had at the National Hockey League level, they're not regarded in the same at all the same as Peter Stastny, but it's not their fault they couldn't come over before then. Anton Stastny would have been in the NHL in the mid 70s. Marion Stastny would have been, well, let's see, early mid-70s, he would have been in the NHL too. We would be having a discussion about the great Stastny brothers if they had not been for the Iron Curtain. So 81-82, 80 games played with Quebec for Peter, 46 goals, 93 assists, which is second overall. This is where he's playing with both of his brothers. They played on a line together. Turns out they know each other pretty well. 139 points, which is third overall. In the playoffs, he plays 12 games, 7 goals, 11 assists, 18 points. He's fourth in Hart voting, and he plays in the All-Star game that year. Anton Stastny that year, 68 games, 26 goals, 46 assists for 72 points. In the playoffs, 16 games, 5 goals, 10 assists, 15 points. In Marion's first year, so now Marion's joined the party, 74 games, 35 goals, 54 assists, 89 points. So as a line, that's 46 goals, 26 goals, so 82, 36 goals. That's 118 goals for the three brothers. It's not bad. And the 89 points is remarkable. And in the playoffs, in 16 games, he has 3 goals, 14 assists for 17 points. He has almost as many points as Peter. He has more points than Anton. And he finishes 8th in the Calder voting at age 29. So all of the discussion I hear now about, oh, this guy shouldn't be eligible. Why is he eligible? He's 26. Yeah, try 29. And then, of course, we would see the Russians come over, and then Makarov wins, and everybody says, okay, that's enough of this. So 82-83, the third year for Peter Stastny. 75 games, 47 goals, 77 assists, which is third overall. 124 points, which is second overall in the playoffs. 4 games. 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. He finishes 7th in the Hart voting, and he plays in the All-Star game. That same year, 82-83, for Anton Stastny, 79 games, 32 goals, 60 assists, which is 8th overall. So 2 brothers in the top 10 in assists, 92 points, which isn't too shabby, and in the playoffs, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points in 4 games. And he doesn't go into any All-Star games. Anton Stastny's kind of the forgotten one here. 82-83, the year for Marion Stastny, 60 games, 36 goals, 43 assists, 79 points. In the playoffs, 2 games, no points. So 82-83, so let's see, you got 89, 79, 124. That's a lot of points for the brothers. And again, historically, we remember Peter. And it makes sense, because Peter's outshining them, but it's not like Marion's numbers are bad. He's in his 30s, and he's still scoring above a point per game. And Anton, kind of in that same vein there. 83-84, 80 games played in Quebec for Peter Stastny, 46 goals, 73 assists, which is 4th overall, 119 points, 4th overall as well. In the playoffs, 9 games, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points, and he plays in the All-Star game. So, how did the 83-84 season go for Anton? 69 games, 25 goals, 37 assists, 62 points. In the playoffs, 9 games, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points. So not bad. Not bad overall. Just a little under a point per game. For Marion, things are slowing down. 68 games, 20 goals, 32 assists, 52 points. In the playoffs, 9 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. And again, he didn't come over until he was 29. So it makes sense that he's slowing down earlier than the other two. And again, when we look at this historically, fans would just look and say, well, Marion wasn't very good. He only played 322 games in the NHL. Didn't make his debut until he was 29. So, the following season, we are now into 84-85, 75 games played by Peter, 32 goals, 68 assists, which is 6th overall, 100 points, but it's the 80s, so that doesn't get you a top 10. In the playoffs, 18 games, 4 goals, 19 assists, 23 points. Peter Stastny was very good in the playoffs. The Stastny brothers were very good in the playoffs as a whole. 84-85 for Anton, 79 games, 38 goals, 42 assists, 80 points. So he bounces back, gets back above a point per game in the playoffs. A little more of a challenge for him there. 16 games, 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points. Now for Marion, the injuries have really caught up to him. 50 games played that year, 7 goals, 14 assists, 21 points, and he only plays 2 games in the playoffs. Marion Stastny's time in Quebec is done. He is signed as a UFA the following summer by the Toronto Maple Leafs. So a bit of a surprise move by Marion there, and it was one that I'd kind of forgotten until I was researching this video. So minus their brother, 85-86, Peter Stastny, 76 games, 41 goals, 81 assists, which is 4th overall, 122 points, which is 6th overall. In the playoffs, just the 1 assist in 7 games. But he's 7th in Hart voting, and he goes back to the All-Star game. So it's a very good year for him personally. But for Quebec, the cracks are starting to show just a little bit. So 85-86 for Anton, 74 games played, 31 goals, 43 assists, 74 points. Right at point per game. In the playoffs, 3 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. So Marion's a very reliable goal scorer and point scorer. And he's getting into his 30s now as well. And so, you're going to see a bit of a drop off from him. He would eventually end up going back to Europe, but we're not there yet. 85-86 would be the final year for Marion Stastny. He plays in Toronto, 70 games, 23 goals, so he had a nice bounce back, 30 assists for 53 points. In the playoffs, he plays just the 3 games, and no points for him there, and he would return to Europe, where he would finish out his career. 85-86 then is the final year that all 3 Stastnys are in the National Hockey League at the same time. So 86-87, 64 games played for Peter, 24 goals, 53 assists, 77 points. So a bit of a slowdown for him that year. In the playoffs, though, he plays quite well. 13 games, 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. 86-87 for Anton Stastny, a bit of a drop-off here. 77 games, 27 goals, 35 assists, 62 points. In the playoffs, 13 games, 3 goals, 8 assists for 11 points. 87-88 now, this is where Quebec has really dropped off. And I think that the Stastnys, the rise of the Stastnys was part of what brings Quebec up. And then when that kind of falls apart, that's where Quebec starts to fall apart. So, 87-88, 76 games played for Peter, 46 goals, 65 assists, which is 9th overall in the NHL. 111 points, which is 5th overall. And he does go to the All-Star game again that year. For Anton, that season, 87-88, 69 games, 27 goals, 45 assists, 72 points. So he's back above a point per game, playing quite well. But then 88-89 is really where things are disastrous. Now keep in mind, I didn't mention playoffs because Quebec has now fallen out of those playoffs. 72 games for Peter Stastny, 35 goals, 50 assists, 85 points. 88-89 would also mark the final season for Anton Stastny in the National Hockey League. 65 games with Quebec, and the scoring drops way off. 7 goals, 30 assists, 37 points, and he returns to Europe where he would finish out his career. So it's just Peter Stastny's show now. And again, there are many reasons why Peter Stastny is the most highly regarded of the 3 brothers, and this is part of it, is that longevity. We've talked about that. Longevity will put you in the Hall of Fame, which is where Peter Stastny's been since 1998. 89-90, 62 games with Quebec, 24 goals, 38 assists, 62 points. And then Quebec does the unthinkable. The Quebec Nordiques, who have had some rough years, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, they trade Peter Stastny. March the 6th, he's traded for Randy Velishek and Craig Wolanin. So that's what you get for Peter Stastny at that point. Now, after the trade with New Jersey, 12 games played, 5 goals, 6 assists for 11 points. In the playoffs, he adds 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points in 6 games. For Peter, he's probably just happy to be playing games that matter and to be able to go in and play playoff games, for instance. But in New Jersey, his scoring has dropped off. 90-91, 77 games, 18 goals, 42 assists, 60 points. In the playoffs, he does up his game. 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points in 7 games. 92-93, 62 games played with New Jersey, 17 goals, 23 assists, 40 points. In the playoffs, he adds 2 assists in 5 games. So he's missing games. He's got fewer points. He ends up becoming a free agent. Eventually, he signs with St. Louis, which was odd as well. March the 9th, he signs with the Blues, plays 17 games after signing. 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points. 1994 playoffs, he plays 4 games with St. Louis and no points. 94-95, he only played 6 games with St. Louis, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. He ends up retiring, of course. He ends up playing 977 games in the playoffs, or 977 games in the playoffs, 977 regular season games. Nobody's played 977 playoff games. 450 goals, which is 62nd overall in the NHL's history. 789 assists, which is 35th in NHL history. And 1,239 points, which is 40th in NHL history. Remember, he doesn't come over and start playing until he's 24 years of age in the National Hockey League. So again, if he had played an extra 5 years, who knows what kind of points he would have put. You got to think at least 500 or 600 more points, and he'd be talked about a lot more in terms of being one of the greatest players ever. But don't count out Anton Stastny. Or I should do the playoff games first for Peter. 93 games, 23 goals, 72 assists, 105 points. He was very good when the games were important, as was Anton. 650 games played in the regular season, 252 goals, 384 assists for 636 points. I know it's the 80s. I know people were scoring points like crazy, but still having a record where your points are right around the same as games played, pretty good. In the playoffs, in 66 games, he has 20 goals, 32 assists for 52 points. Good. Marian Stastny would only play 322 games in the NHL. 121 goals, 173 assists for 294 points. Not too shabby. 32 games played in the playoffs, 5 goals, 17 assists for 22 points. So the brothers defected. They were going to try it at the Olympics in 1980, but the security was too tight. So they would have been able to play part of the 79-80 season if they had been able to do that. So the following summer, Czechoslovakian team is in Austria, and they see their opening, and they find a way to fly to Quebec City. And once the government knew what was going on, the Quebec Nordiques management had to move quickly because, I mean, if these guys had been caught trying to defect, who knows, right? Not likely to have been in the NHL at that point, and yeah, you don't want to find out what'll happen. And of course, the trick then is that if you get out, you have to make sure your family gets out as well, because as I said, Marian did pay the price for a year until he was able to defect. He had to wait that long. It took that long before he found that he was not being surveilled quite so much. And then he took advantage of, going to a secondary location and then flying to Quebec City and becoming a Nordique as well. So kind of a proud moment in Quebec Nordiques history that they relived a year later when they brought in Marian as well. I liked them together. I thought they were great. So while everybody else loved Gretzky and eventually Lemieux and all that, I was a huge Peter Stastny fan, but I was also an Anton and Marian Stastny fan. And it is easy to forget, as I said, because of how short, relatively speaking, Anton's and Marian's careers were, to forget how good they were. And they were overshadowed by their brother. But yeah, they were quite the trio and made me a huge fan of a team that wore a jersey very similar to this. This is actually the first year jersey that they did a throwback to from Adidas a year ago. But I thought for this video, why not? So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Peter won a bunch of championships as well. He did win the gold in 1977. 1978 and 79, the World Championship team won silver. Marian's part of those teams too, I believe. And like when you get into the Stastny brothers, I don't know that it matters as much about all the championships, but that 1977 gold and 1976 beating the Soviets and all that, that's pretty impressive stuff. Canada Cup, silver for Peter in 1976 as a Czechoslovakian representative. And in 1984, he wins gold at the Canada Cup because he wore a Team Canada jersey. All three of them became Canadian citizens. And Peter played for Team Canada, played pretty darn well. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And yes, Peter is the father of Paul Stastny, who's currently in the NHL. Thanks again for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.